My name's David Grishby and welcome to this A Clear Head Nautilus webinar. I'm a former head teacher, was a head teacher for 12 years in the north of England. I'm also a local authority advisor and the co-creator of Nautilus. So everything that I'm going to show you today has been created really from the head teacher's chair, I guess, from being in the position of the school leader, and also for years and years of putting up with some rather kind of limiting and frustrating processes in school. So we're going to take a look and think about using iPads. The interesting thing about using iPads, I used to see head teachers all the time at meetings with them, more often than not for note-taking. I think we can do better. We can use iPads and tablets to multitask, which means that we can use those devices collectively across the shop floor to be able to collect, capture, evaluate all of the teaching and learning that we use. So that's what we'll focus on today. We're also going to think about this being supportive and developmental. So you'll see with the design of the frameworks that we use, and that's interesting thinking about the theory. After 30 years in education, I really came to the point that there were things that I thought were valid and things that I thought were not. And quite often we were doing things and working really hard to do a lot of systematic monitoring in school, but the impact was questionable. So we're going to think a little bit about how we can make sure that our staff can adopt these processes and it's something that they can use themselves, which in that sense, it has to be supportive and developmental. We're going to think about securing distributed leadership. It's really important that this session is very much about providing systematic approaches for our leaders in school. It's great as a head teacher to be rooted and involved in those processes yourselves, but once you enable your staff to be able to adopt those processes and to get into the classroom, and once we provide learning walks and tools and resources for them to work efficiently, then ultimately, everything clicks and the capacity for sustained improvement becomes more significant. So we're going to think about really today how we can provide those systems and processes for our colleagues. We're going to think about how we can contribute to build collaboratively, collectively across school with internal and external leaders to build a picture of standards. So we know what standards look like in the classroom, to provide feedback and to be efficient with that as well. And really to kind of have everything in one place. And I'll show you that in a minute as to how we can do that. And the whole objective really from today's session and leadership in general is that idea of having clarity and confidence. So how can we leave the building feeling secure and assured about standards in the classroom without relying on test scores? And that's the key thing. And how can we do that in good time? Do we value our time, or do we find ourselves working harder and longer to be able to get the job done? So again, it's going to be about efficiency today, but not just clarity and confidence for the head teacher. What we would want to do is ensure that our SENDcos, subject leaders, aspect leaders, early years, key stage, year heads, whatever they may be, whatever responsibility they have, how can we enable them to leave the school feeling confident and with clarity as well? And that's the key thing. That's very difficult to do, to know your subject really, really well. And so we'll look at those systematic processes today. The little model that you can see there, I think is just thought-provoking at this point in the session, because it begs the question really, if you take any of your activities in school, observations, monitoring, call them what you like, book studies, scrutinies, these kind of activities, and place it on that matrix, how does it fare? Is it efficient? Does it impact? And is it accurate? So what I'm used to seeing, what we know really, and what we talk to schools and head teachers from across the world, and this is what we learn, is we have a server that is scattered with all of those kind of documents. So you can see that random selection there of blue dots on the screen. Imagine that each one of those represents some kind of a monitoring activity, which is really key. And again, I will stress this, we're not thinking about the data and domain analysis from test scores, because that can be questionable. If we write school improvement plans based on the year 6 data, for example, and the SATs, and then apply them to year 5, we kind of know that some of it may fit and some of it may not. And we may end up working really hard at the same time. So if we can focus on the teaching and learning and influence and develop skill sets here, then ultimately we can make a difference when it comes to the outcomes. I'm not saying that the outcomes and tests aren't valid, but they are just one indicator. And as a head, I would much rather kind of shine a light and focus on how we can develop in school. And that means not necessarily looking at appraisals that are pay and career stage related. This is again those processes in school for quality assuring, evaluating, so that all of our leaders are well placed to be able to identify next steps, what we do well, what we do less well. So this represents my server. On there, we've got surveys, book studies, lesson visits, observations, all these kind of things, and it's scattered across the server. Each one is standalone. We've performed the activity. We've then gone away and reported on it. Then we've tried to feedback. Sometimes the feedback is not great, and I will hold my hand up there. Sometimes the quality lacks impact. It's not timely. It's problematic. Work gets in the way. But ultimately, they are all standalone. So they all one activity that we do once and then it expires a little bit. And so we build up this portfolio, and it is a massive scattering because, like I say, we have surveys and then files and sub files and T drives and English and term one and all these kind of things. But how does that help us as a head teacher? And as a head teacher, the biggest question that we're going to be asked is, tell me about standards in the classroom. And that question is very hard to answer, because we are trying to draw upon that scattering of blue dots to be able to kind of articulate, and it's not easy. And we know it's not easy, and it's also ineffective. It's not helping us really to be able to kind of plan for the school, I guess. So what we want to do is to be able to kind of bring all of these things together and see them holistically. So how can we create systems and build a picture of teaching and learning that gives us this secure, clear overview of standards in the classroom, the one that we're all looking for, and this is the holy grail. And this is what we're going to look at, because if each of these activities are performed with iPads and we have processes of building up pictures, then ultimately we can store everything centrally and we can use a dashboard to be able to see what that can look like. And really, when we developed Nautilus, the whole idea was, again, that principle of having these standalone activities. How can we funnel it all into one place? And this is what leaders talk to about, whether or not you use pieces of paper or performers or Google Docs or whatever. How can we avoid having standalone processes? And how can we populate and build that bigger picture, which is more credible? So here, what you can see is my leadership dashboard. I'm a head teacher, and I can see all of the different learning walks that we're performing. I can key in and then be able to learn more about any of these. So for maths, I can pop. This is my current year. If I click, and we'll see all time. Then we can key in any subjects. So maths, for example, we can see what they look like. We could see governors and so on, and it's that accessibility. So with that work that we've done, how can we leverage and gain more from it and get impact? We can apply filters on here. We'll come back to this space shortly and take a little look closer at it. We can use data to evaluate what we do well, what we do less well. We can look at key stages, cohorts. We can use AI as well, and we'll come back to that shortly. And that just presents all of those insights. So we're not reliant on those PDF downloads. We can just ask it to tell us something from the insights in the system. So this is already giving me that kind of assurance, because I can see the learning walks that I've done, the senior leaders have done, but also what the subject leaders have done too. And that's what we're going to take a look at in a minute. We're going to think about what those processes look like and what we're providing, the toolkit that those leaders have to be able to build this picture. And this is the sum total of everybody's contributions, which is great because it's highly collaborative. The data we're going to use is broken up into 4 areas. So I'm just going to kind of just mention this a little bit, because we've talked about this being supportive and developmental. We have a rubric, and the benefit of the rubric is it gives us data, not just for me as a head to help, aligns nicely with my self-evaluation, but for me as a subject leader, it's really important that we think and work strategically and are able to see what we do well. And I'm going to really kind of emphasize the fact that a lot of this is about providing teachers with timely recognition, and what we do less well, making a suggestion, sharing an idea. So the rubric that we're going to use here is broken up into 4 areas. We can actually rename these, we can change the color schemes, we can switch them off. We don't have to refer to them. And I will say all of the data coming into the system is for school improvement purposes. So it's for your use. And that's really important that we consider that. How you use it and what you do with it is up to you. But suffice to say that the byproduct is inspection and the byproduct is evidence. But the primary purpose is for us to be able to help us to make those improvements and to evaluate the impact of our curriculum. It's a really critical point, as we'll come back to. So over here, we're going to use 4 terms. So these are designed to do one of 2 things. And this is what you can do with a rubric. It's good that, there's lots of different ways to do it. But our rubric has 4 areas. We've got effective and highly effective. And what I would say is we are creating prompts here, which prompt and do and offer, one of 2 things. So effective and highly effective is an opportunity to provide recognition, to validate the hard work of the teacher, to commend them for good practice. Develop or prioritize, that's an invitation and an opportunity to collaborate, to share an idea, to make a recommendation. And that's why we're framing it in this way, because we're acknowledging that for the teachers, they are working alongside their colleagues. And we can also acknowledge then, can't we, that, if you teach 9 lessons in primary, there's going to be some, variation in competence. So you may be really good at teaching English, but your music, you might actually admit, it's not my subject. I'm not great at it. And so let's be open to that conversation. Let's develop those areas of the curriculum, bearing in mind that most of those class teachers as well are also going to be subject leaders pursuing those same insights. So it's interesting how we kind of frame it in that way. And I think it's really important that we shift the narrative and we own the process. So you can consult, change, edit those, but just from the first instance, the good thing is it's going to give us data, and that's really helpful. Okay, so let's have a little think about sort of popping into the classrooms now, because before we take a look at this, and also I'm going to show you the gallery today, which is where we build up this portfolio of insights and videos and pictures that we could tag and use to spotlight and set the expectation in school. Let's take a look and have a little think about the process. So we are going to log into our devices, so iPads or tablets. It's web-based, it's not an app, so you can just pick it up and go. There's a trial as well if you want to just have a little play with it. And then we head to the walks. I've got my iPad here, and in my to-do list, I've already sort of populated this and assigned some walks to myself. So what we can see here in my to-do list is 4 visits. I'm going to go see 4 teachers, and I set it up so that I'm going to go see, it's Key Stage 2, and it's English subject specific, and I'm going to go see Year 3, 4, 5, and 6. Each one of these is going to be about 10 minutes. We can gain, this is where the iPad is or tablet is really useful, because we can multitask. So we can, in 10 minutes, get an awful lot as well if the framework, the design of the framework is good. So we're going to do those 4 visits. From my experience, we can sometimes find ourselves being in a classroom for an hour when the teacher down the corridor needs help and this teacher really doesn't. And if you've been observing a teacher year after year after year after year for an hour each time, in actual fact, after a little while, you realize that you don't need to be in the classroom that long to appreciate what they do well. And that's the thing. It's about building up that intel and getting to know people. But also, a 10-minute visit is light touch. We emphasize with the staff that it's going to be business as usual. And so we want to see a good, honest kind of lesson, and we want to see a snapshot. And ultimately, that's going to enable us to give some accurate and meaningful feedback, not to mention the fact that the evaluations will be accurate too, because it's typical. Anything longer, sooner as it, we were in there for an hour, stakes go up, the expectations increase, and we can find it skewed. So I'm going to pop in and see Phileas. We're going to use a framework. I'm just going to talk very quickly about the design. This is really interesting. Again, after my 30 years in education, we didn't get this right, but I now realize how it can look if we want to prioritize efficiency. So we're going to look at just 4 lines of inquiry, which encapsulate anything, and then we're going to use prompts for feedback, so it's developmental. So engagement here we can see is the first thing, and if I walk into the classroom, I can see the children are engaged. In here, I'm going to pop in my thoughts and just identify and recognize what the teacher is doing to engage the children. So I'm going to use the voice type here to be able to show you how this can be done. I really like the relationships that you have with the children. Why not put an activity on the board to settle them down after playtime? Full stop. I guess it should be a question mark, but regardless. The good thing is with that kind of technology is that we use it in our day-to-day lives on our phones, Siri, Gemini, those kind of things. On this occasion, that means that we could just put a couple of thoughts in, and also it enables us to get straight onto the feedback. So we're not going to have that reporting process that slows everything down. So we're going to get straight from the visit onto the feedback. I'm going to show you how we can email and share that to a colleague as well. So in here, we put that down. I'm saying I like that. This is good, but let's let's try this. It is about that reflection. Most visits are going to be about they're really going to be focusing on effectiveness and evaluating and sharing ideas rather than competency, because most teaching most of the time is good. And like I say, if it's an opportunity to develop, then fine. Prioritize, sometimes that might be the case, but most of the time it's going to be effective. I'd also like to sort of stress here that this is about evaluating the impact of what the teacher does. So it's about effectiveness. And that's why we're looking and saying, right, okay, we can see that the children are engaged. How does this teacher achieve that? It could be relationships, humor, the topic, the themes, the questions, the seating arrangement. It could be any of those things. But rather than having a checklist descriptor and say, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, which, that's more about compliance. And also that means that we spend longer in the classroom to see all of those things being demonstrated. So it means we're going to be in there longer. So on this occasion, we can see the impact. The next question is how you doing this, and that could differ from class to class. That's a great invitation for anybody to give recognition. Love the relationships that you've got here, and that enables teachers to leave the building feeling valued. So let's not forget that this process, whilst we're wired for school improvement, is also very much about channels for recognition, because quite often they are lacking. In my school, we would do a learning walk, and sometimes quite often the feedback would be, yeah, it was really good, thanks everyone, we had a good learning walk. The school improvement partner was really impressed, thanks for your efforts, and that generalized feedback doesn't really hit the sweet spot, and teachers thrive on recognition. So if we want them to stay and have job satisfaction, and we want to retain staff, ultimately these are the processes which can really make a big difference. So on this learning snapshot, there's just 4 areas to use, and that just means it's really efficient. The feedback isn't excessive, and we can say, like this is good, try this. And it's sort of weighting things like that, which most of the time that's how it's going to be. So here we're looking at engagement, and then we start to take a little look closer, and we think about the pedagogy, strategies and techniques for learning, oracy, questioning, pitch, pace, progression, modeling, use of IT, resources. Could be any of those things. But again, we don't want a checklist. We want to see the impact of these things. So this is kind of arguably subject knowledge really on this occasion, which will differ. I'll go back to that point really about the fact that here on this occasion, this could be effective because it's a teacher that says, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. It could be developing because they've moved from year 5 to year 1, or career-wise, or they've got a pupil with high needs. So that variation in competency is something that we should acknowledge and recognize in the staff room, to put people in a safe place and to create those channels so that everyone is open to that feedback. That's the way that we're going to improve our curriculum in each subject, in each cohort, and across the whole thing. It's good to kind of have those conversations. Okay, so we've looked at pedagogy, really interesting one. It's good to kind of put that language and terminology out there as well so that the staff, because this framework here that we're using, whilst we're using it for English, we could use this for science, music, PE, it fits any subject, any lesson. We're creating a common language for all of our leaders to adopt. You can edit these, you can change them, you can create your own. But again, by just ensuring that we've got those key focused lines of inquiry, we don't deviate, it doesn't become derailed, and it stays nice and sharp. Pedagogy is something that is good to kind of hear discussed in the staff room. People talking about strategies for teaching and learning, what works, what we can develop. I don't think it's used enough, and it's certainly not something that you kind of hear very often externally from inspectorates and so on. We're then going to think about the learning, and you can see here we're thinking about acquisition and application. It's only ever either or both. So again, all leaders are focused. How does that look? We could pause this, we could leave the room, and we could come back and then say, could I take a look at a couple of books, expected standard? I'm just interested to see what the outcomes look like. We don't have to bookend this observation and spend an hour in the classroom to be able to evaluate progress or outcomes. So here we could look at the questions, question the children, see their engagement, look in the books. We could talk to them. We could see what they did yesterday, first page to last. Lots of ways of being able to look at the acquisition and application in this subject in this class. Then what we could do is pause it, come back and look at the outcomes in this lesson and ask the teacher, show me so-and-so's book, show me an example of. And that's a good way to increase accuracy and also to make sure it's efficient at the same time and to be respectful so it's a lighter touch visit, going back to what we said about being supportive. Value is by the time we leave the room, we're thinking about the value. So we're thinking here about the success, the impact, we're evaluating those kind of things. We're not using progress, attainment, achievement, ARE. Those are all fairly contentious, can feel a bit pass or fail, can have numerical thresholds, or inspectorates can have definitions for those things. So what we want to do is just to be able to frame this nicely so colleagues can leave the room and say how successful, how effective the learning was. You can reference progress in here, but you're not shackled to it. So we're getting data, we're getting feedback, and the data here we can use for subjects, aspects, year groups, cohorts, with all the filters on the dashboard. We're getting comments and thoughts and views, and we're using Voicetype, and we're sharing those the same day. I'll show you that in a minute. We're then going to take pictures. So in here, I'm going to toggle the camera, and we're now going to really go way beyond really what an observation typically would do. So this is where I love the idea of being able to kind of showcase and spotlight the best practice. So I'm going to take a picture, then I'm going to tag it by subject, year group. I'm also going to tag it by area of study. You can create your own tags, by the way, here. And so we'll look at those. I'm going to tag it by expected standard because that's an interesting one, because then I could take pictures and then in the gallery, I could show people what it looks like between year 3, 4, 5, and 6 for writing expected standard. So we could show that progression. We could also do it and by flicking through the books and looking at fiction, non-fiction, persuasive writing, everything else, and build that picture as a leader up over time that shows that progression across cohorts and between cohorts for each subject area, and arguably each topic too. We could add lots of things we want to share here that we like about this, like, I don't know, handwriting, spelling, content, clauses, whatever it may be. Pop those in there to say that this is what this demonstrates. But we can also now tag this, if needs be, that this pupil has additional needs. And we could also add either pupil premium or free school meals or disadvantage, whichever term you want to adopt. And that means that then we can then bring those up in the gallery and look at SEND and pupil premium. So it's English, year 6, non-fiction, expected standard, and or SEND and pupil premium. Little bit of commentary, what we like about it, submit that to the gallery, and that'll go into there. So obviously my camera's in use, so it's not going to take a picture, but you can imagine what I'm doing as I'm going around the classroom in that 10 minutes, popping over the shoulder, taking those shots. Well, what about those other subjects? We talk about having a broad and balanced curriculum, and we looked at video and we were a bit unsure to begin with when we were developing this. But because we work with schools, all over the world, they were the ones who were making the suggestions. And I love the fact that since, I left my post and we developed this to help schools, we're now in a position where we work alongside schools and listen to their thoughts and views. And so when somebody makes a suggestion more than once, we pop that in for development and we look to see how we can do that. And we're a small company, so we're agile. We can add this content and develop as we go. So we added this idea of video. And the reason why I was a little bit unsure is normally the server again is clogged up with an hour and a half levers assembly and those kind of things. And with a wobbly camera, nobody looks at them really, but they are there just stored in case of evidence or whatever. So we were thinking, how can we integrate this? And so what we came up with was the idea of 20-second clips. It's really focused. Once we did that, we started to think, right, okay, what about those tags then? So we can then start to think about music, MFL or language. We can start to think about PE, dance, drama, outdoor learning, whatever it may be, those other areas of the curriculum, because we talk about having a broad and balanced curriculum, but what do? We then stick to monitoring English and maths because logistically it's easier to do that. So really the interesting thing here is that we can now evaluate all of our curriculum and we can show that and spotlight, the outcomes for that whole breadth that we've got. Great as well for people with additional needs and any kind of specific interventions that we've got there. What we could do here as well is, interestingly enough, and I think that this is a really knockout idea, is we can take video of readers, and I'll show you in a moment. We assess reading with a piece of paper. So here we can evaluate a reader. We can tag it by year group. We can assess it. We can show fluency, we can show decoding, there's a lot we can gain. A 20-second clip, submit that, and then all of the staff can use that sample to learn what the outcomes should look like in reading in each year group. And that's really profound when you've got sort of year 5 and 6 teachers looking at early years, for example. So it's great for being able to kind of put in those samples that everybody can relate to and use to be able to assess the reading in their year group. So we'll come back to that shortly. Okay, so we're gaining a lot, and this is a 10-minute visit, and then I'm going to pop over and see Ned. So it might be 5 minutes. It depends how long. Normally, if you're suitably short, after 7 or 8 minutes, you're out of the classroom. If you're still looking for opportunities for feedback or to get your feedback correct, then you may take a little bit longer. But you can work more intuitively. People are going to need, where needs must across the school, and that's useful. So an hour of leadership management time, which usually costs the school per teacher about £1,200 per year. And that's to have a leader given an hour of leadership management time, 1 hour per week per leader. So that's a lot of money. So how are we providing the tools for them to be able to kind of use that time effectively? And that's the key thing, going back to the role of the head teacher again. Does this systematically build that bigger picture? And what do they do with their time? And how is it impacting? Is it consistent between leaders? So if we provide a snapshot like that, we've now got a common language and a process that we can apply across all leaders. So we've got a method of going into class. Staff know what it looks like as a teacher. And also it's nice and concise because it's really concise and distilled, and it's developmental, as we've mentioned. So 3 more visits there. That will create a report with 4 visits, and we'll look a little bit at the stats in a moment. And that's English because it's subject specific. Over here, we've got the one that we've just done. So I popped in a moment ago to see Phileas Fogg. I can edit that and I can email it directly to Phileas. So I would love to be able to say we'll all have a chat, and it's really important after a lesson visit that we sit down and talk a lot and unpick the lesson. Sometimes you can do that as a subject leader. I'm not sure if that's practical. As a subject leader, what we want to do is we want to provide that validation. So we want to say to the teacher, thanks for letting me in your classroom. This is for you. And there is your invitation to say, I really like this. This is really great. I love this. So there's no judgment on this, and we can email it onto our colleague, and we can, like I say, love this, love this, love this, try this. And that's the idea with this. And they can then use that to support appraisals or whatever. But more importantly, they've got something from that visit. And that enables them to appreciate and understand that that's valuable and that's valid, but also that opportunity for recognition. So you can see how it's been framed. It is thorough because it shows the lines of inquiry, but it's also about that professional dialogue, because most of the time it's not about failure. Most of the time it's just really about sort of try this, or I've seen this down here, why don't you try this? And so it's kind of you're facilitating and brokering those suggestions and ideas on behalf of your subject, I guess, or aspect if it's SEND, early years and so on. So we can impart that insight. You could obviously do it after a chat if you really wanted to spend more time doing that. So that's looking really at a learning snapshot. That's kind of one tool. And once we apply that across the school, we've kind of cracked an awful lot of our kind of lesson visits because it's flexible, intuitive, infinite. What if we want to do a book study? And these are interesting when we look at book studies. So I've created one here. Let's just take a little look at this one. And the book studies, the design is the same. So we're creating again a tool for all of our leaders to use if it's in a book. I mean, we've got a work study and equivalent as well if it's not in a book. But on this occasion, we're going to do the expected standard. So we're looking here at Key Stage 2 expected standards, so an equivalent to the last one, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to say to each teacher, can I have 2 books expected standard? And you might be thinking, why am I not doing top, middle, and bottom? That's what we do. And that's what I did. It takes longer and it's less insightful. Focus, and it's all about keeping it sharp, and it's also about building up a picture. It doesn't create a standalone process. We are populating that dashboard, so we're learning more all the time. We're getting insight and data there. And here we can use the book study nice and quickly again to be able to do that. So we're looking at presentation, care and consideration, pitch, appropriate program of study. We've worked hard on our curriculum. We can see in the books if it's well pitched. Pupil contributions, so regular and sustained application. So the acquisition and application element, again, can we see that the children have got time for sustained writing on this occasion? Progress on the day towards the objective, Monday to Friday, first page to last. It's all relative progress. So again, we're not using national averages or thresholds. Challenge and extension. It's not about us telling your staff how to run a school. This is about the application and the impact of your policy. So how does it work? What does it look like across the staff? And then thinking about marking and feedback in the same way. We'd also be taking pictures now with these English books of, like I say, the fiction, non-fiction, biographies, whatever it may be, instructions, all those kind of areas, tagging it expected standard and showcasing what that looks like in year 5 and then in year 4. So it's one entry here per teacher. We don't want excessive feedback, but we're looking at 2 books possibly, just so we can get the measure and validate that progression in learning as a leader, as a subject leader for year 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you can start to see as a head teacher how we're enabling those leaders to pick up a common language. We're guiding them, but we're not dictating how to teach the lesson. We're prompting to be able to provide that feedback and support where needed, and advice and recommendations and recognition and those things. We're capturing, taking the pictures and building the portfolio so we can spotlight and set the expectation. And then in a moment, we're going to take a look at the data too. So that's the other half really of the subject leaders toolkit. So you can see that is for book studies. We've looked at a learning snapshot. It's even interesting really when we start to look at SEND and we start to think about enabling our SENDcos to have those processes, because I want this session not really just to focus on subject leadership, but also any leadership. SENDcos typically are spending a lot of time in the office on the evidence trail, and it's very administrative. They are the people who should and can know those children as they arrive in early years and leaving year six. Everybody else will have them for 1 year, but if they know those children, they are really well placed to be able to advise them and support from one end to the other. So let's say, for example, as we start to drop into the classrooms as a SENDco and get to know the children, we then advise each teacher as that child progresses over time. Let's develop the capacity across the shop floor for a good SEND provision. And let's do it in a way where we're putting our SENDco back into the classroom, giving them the tools to be able to advise and support and to give recognition and to evaluate our SEND provision. So as a head teacher, I can go to the dashboard, click send, and I see what they've been doing. I see those insights that they've collated. And that's really good for my confidence. It's good for me to be able to support my SENDco. But more importantly, it creates capacity. And I think this is the key thing. Rather than be a SENDco and sit in the office waiting for a knock at the door to say that the child's progress has stopped, what we're doing is we're in the classroom helping staff to ensure that the progress for each individual child is sustained. So let's take a little look again at the design. So here we're looking at the environment. We're then thinking as in the classroom about the curriculum, engaging and accessible, how it's been personalized for the child, differentiated, call it what you like, as long as we've got that common language, pupil support, direct or indirect. And then we're looking at the progress from individual starting points, so relative progress. So the SENDco pops into the classrooms, takes pictures, takes video, evaluates the effectiveness, get some feedback really, and we can impart that and share that the same day. That goes into the system, and then we've got that data dashboard to be able to use there. So you can see how we can use an iPad to be able to kind of get around and just use these really simple, concise frameworks to be able to drop into classrooms. We can also use the click and go here if we just want to head out into the classrooms, and we can add tags as well. So we can add filters for year groups, cohorts, and things like that. And that's just a good way to be able to drop in, even if it's not subject specific, you know. We want to just go in and say, oh, what's the lesson? We're focusing on teaching or questioning today, and it's science. So we can just add science there. We don't have to assign it beforehand. Okay, so over to the dashboard. Let's take a little look at how we can use these insights. So we're building up this picture. This is my current year, and this is all time. So the score that I've got here is my score in my school, 3.11. One is low, four is high. That's the rubric giving us an average right across the school. And that's just to help us to benchmark. So if I go up to the top here and I look at AFL and it's 3.38, I can see that that activity was slightly above the average in school. And once you've got that flow of information coming in from your leaders, as a head teacher, I can now see, is it better or is it worse? This one here below, we might need to take a closer look at because it's below. It's quite a way below. So what is it around that one? So we can click into that one and learn more. So it's just tipping us off, and we're creating internally this benchmarking process where the data can really guide and support us strategically as a leader. I can see down here as well, we can do parent surveys and pupil surveys as well. We'll take a quick look at those today because that's useful for subject leaders and other leaders. We can see what those outcomes look like as we break them up into those kind of four areas. So we can just see what it looks like, the amount of things we might need to focus on, for example. We can see a timeline down here, so we've just got an idea of how that looks over time. Over here, we're looking and seeing that that's 3.2, so it's slightly above. So the average timeline is fairly healthy, as we can see here. And down here, we can see each learning walk that we're doing. There's our learning snapshots. There's our book studies, again, with the outcomes. This one over here, send, and so on. So you've got this insight all pooled and going into one place. If we then start to think about using AI to utilize this insight, we can really leverage this. And this is where really it moves, I think, into a really, really exceptional kind of process, because one thing that I'm used to and most people will be used to is that idea that you've got drop down. So at the top you've got subject, year group, term, free school meals, ethnicity, some are born, click PDF, you get a report, and then you go, that's the wrong one. Then you get the report, then you send it to the governors, then you have to articulate and and explain and interpret that report. So here we can read the summary. So Nemo down here in the bottom left corner, our dashboard assistant is showing me of our last 20 walks or activities, what we do well and what we do less well. And you can see how that's being listed. If we want to reframe that question and we want to say create a one paragraph supportive summary, then the interesting thing really about that is we could tailor it to suit the audience. And this is again to validate. So I can anonymize this as well, and I can send that to the staff to say thanks very much, this is great, or to the governors to say I could put it into a SEF. It's excellent the way that it frames it, and that commendation, that idea of really being able to kind of share it and articulate it in a very positive and supportive way, I think is really significant. So he will create charts. I could just say, tell me about Send, tell me about Maths, tell me about Mrs. Smith. And as a priority user, as a head teacher, I can access all that. As a subject leader, we can set this up so that the subject leaders just have their subject. So we can set it up, for example, that the SENDco just has a dashboard, which is Send. So that narrows the view, and that enables me to see all this because I see everything, but the SENDco can then see what the outcomes look like. And there you can see, again, we're comparing it still to the school average. It's important that that stays the same. And then we can see all of the work that we've done. We can use Nemo to be able to learn more about Send. And then we can see the different tools that we've used. So there's our learning snapshot. We've got a learning support one as well. That's interesting. And a Send pupil lesson visit for an individual child. We could then pop across and see what that looks like as a whole school. So we could see what those outcomes, and this is Send. I've still got the filter on. So for me as a head teacher, I can now look and say to my SENDco, tell me a little bit really about these teachers, what you found. It may be that Ernest has a child that's recently excluded, previously excluded, or with high needs. So that enables us to provide support and to have a constructive conversation about how we can help more formatively in the classroom. At the same time, we could see what's effective and highly effective, and it is going to be cohort specific, no doubt, quite often with things like Send. So all of this data is for your use, and it's all relative. But this is interesting because this is for a priority user. We don't need to see this if we're a subject leader necessarily. We can share it as a leader. That's up to us, but there's some sensitivity around it. But that's great once we start to, that completely justifies the process. And if I remove that filter, this shows me now the amount of visits everybody's had or involvement they've had, so we can manage that a little bit, I guess. We can see our strongest and least strongest. And again, it may just be that we've got teachers in certain areas where it stands to reason because they've just moved from year group, or Ernest here, we've got that child, it could be those kind of questions and things that we're learning about the staff. So that question that I began with, where somebody walks into the school and says, tell me about your teaching and learning, how do you know what it looks like in the classroom? There we go. And we can use that to plan strategically and to collaborate with our colleagues too. We can use that as well to look at trends over time. So if I want to then apply a filter for, let's take a look at our book studies. Let's take a look in English. We can then start to see, and again, this idea that we are seeing what those book studies look like over time. So trends, is it improving? We can see people contributing. And again, moving away from a standalone visit, and that's what schools typically have, and building up this picture and seeing, being able to use this to write a SEF or talk to somebody else internally or externally, or to plan strategically, I think is really significant. So I've got those things as a priority user. With each report as well, if we want to do, we could take a closer look. So I mentioned the idea of sort of looking closer at some of these. If I want to go in and take a quick look, and I'll just do this very quickly, but as we come down here, let's take a little look. I've got one here, 20 entries. And the good thing about this learning walk is that it's got 3 contributors. So we've done this learning walk, 3 people together, and we visited the classrooms. We can click in and see what each one the outcome was. And again, we can use the data to provide support and to help, or I can see what my school improvement partner thinks down here. I can look at the outcomes over time and on this occasion. And for each line of inquiry on that snapshot that we looked at today, I could see what the big picture looks like every time we've used it, the aggregate scores, and on this occasion here. So that helps us, and we can take that away in a PDF if we want to do. And that just enables us to share it without having to articulate. Good for governors, good for inspectors, because it's a quick share. We can see what the outcomes look like. More importantly, we can see who's involved. So that external validation is going to be really significant here. And here we can see that this one's fairly broadly in line. You can see that on this occasion, overall time. We can see that this one is even better on this occasion than the average. We can see on this occasion, again, sort of fairly broadly in line, but some things to consider and look at here. And this one down here, we can see is below. And so this will be something to focus on, which is the value, so the outcomes really. It's interesting to look and see what the impact is of what's going on in the classroom on this occasion. And that's for one learning walk, and we can always go back and we can click AI and just get a summary of this walk. So if we just want to say thanks very much to staff, here you'll see, and from that report, there's no reference to teachers or lessons, so it's for strategic purposes. So we're being sensitive all the time and getting the balance of challenge and support right, which again is something to consider when we put these things into our schools. What does that balance look like? Okay, so let's have a little think about those photos and videos. We're now starting to populate and create this gallery that demonstrates the impact of our curriculum. And this is really something that's not been easy to do, really, I guess, certainly for certain subjects. But this just means all the staff have got access to this. So we could set all of our teachers and support staff up as users. And that means they can be assigned learning walks. I could set one up for them, or a colleague can, but they can all access the gallery. And that's really important, because if I'm a year six teacher, or new to year six, and I want to see a piece of writing, and I want to see what the expected standards should look like, my English leader has popped these into the system and tagged them. And I can then use these to be able to say that's how it should look. Those samples are really critical, because in schools quite often we moderate and we do that, and I have this infinite recurring moderation, because it's almost like worry sort of led, isn't it? You know, where it's like, are we accurate? And if our scores aren't right, let's go back and moderate, because they might be inaccurate. And let's moderate across schools. Well, in actual fact, we're moderating all the time, because we're picking up these samples. Now leaders are popping them into here, and then staff are using them. And when we get to a point where this one in actual fact has been superseded and we've got something more, you know, something better, we delete that one and then we refer to this one. So we've got that structure. This is the expected standard, and I can see in different areas across different parts of the school. If I just want to see the expected standard throughout, for the same reason, I could see a greater depth. I could see what's the difference between expected and greater depth. So I can learn and use those. And again, for consistency, that's really useful. This is a great tool for teachers. What if we want to teach art for the first time and we've never taught repeating patterns? What if we want to show a sample to the children to be able to say, this is what we're doing this half term? What if our art leader wants to use this to talk about standards in art in year three? These are serving a purpose. What if a governor wants to be able to talk or quality assure the standards and the outcomes in art? They can come into this, sit down, take a look, key in art, and see this. And it's just a really rich sort of tool for being able to do all of these things. The other beauty of this is, if I'm a SENDco, let's go in and just key in send. And I just, and again, going back to that thing about the SENDco's time being at a premium, as a SENDco, what I can do is I can come into here and I can see these samples that have been submitted, but by the science leader. So this, I haven't had to go and find this. This has been submitted and shared, or the maths leader. And so we can see what the outcomes look like for pupils with additional needs who may not score in tests in those other areas of the curriculum. And that's the quickest way to quality assure. We can even just click and add content to it. So if we just want to take pictures, we could say to the staff next week, take 3 pictures, submit them and tag them, specify what we want them to look at, expected standard, practical, bring these up, and the science leader can then go in and just key in science and then see all these samples that the staff have shared. So Going back to the original point about this session, we are creating processes for staff to be able to collaborate, to share, to develop curriculum areas, to evaluate, and systematically, this is a really impressive way to be able to kind of join those dots that we looked at. The video I mentioned, you won't be able to hear the sound, I don't think, on here. Year one, fluency, standard, yeah. The blending, it shows CVC. We can see that the text level is appropriate. We can even see how the member of staff is supporting. So there's all kinds of ways you can use it, as there would be for PE. If you wanted to put something on a screen, say to the staff, this is how it should look. That's good. I mean, you're getting the idea. So for reading, PE, whatever it may be, some lovely ways to be able to utilize that camera as we're moving around the school and to demonstrate impact across the curriculum. We can use a survey, we can send it out to families, and the beauty of it, they can do it on the phones and things. The great thing about these kind of surveys, same with the pupil surveys, is we can deploy them quickly. We can get the insights on the dashboard. Those are integrated then in our school improvement process. We've got stakeholder views, and then we can utilize those and we can leverage and action things the same day. And then use the AI as well on all those things to create reports for governors or whoever. But that process reduces administration so much because they are very time consuming, and it means that we can kind of use those to influence the improvements that we want to make. So good to be able to deploy those things nice and quickly. We've also got over here the builder. You can create content. We've got our suite of learning walks on the system. So we looked at the book study. We looked at the learning snapshot. You can clone and edit these along with the surveys. We've got other ones as well. We looked at Send, but we've got some there for early years. We've also got a high school platform as well, which is slightly different, a bigger build. And then we've got the ones here that we've made. So governors, how we can help governors really to be able to get into the classrooms and guide them without dictating what the teaching should look like, or judging teaching. Also good for transparency so that staff know the expectations when somebody enters their room. And also there's a good one for learning support staff as well. If you like these, we can share them. So again, you can share between the systems. So where we're working with maths and groups of schools where there may be more than one, they can create something like this for support staff. So, for example, in Wales, we work with a national group of special needs schools. That would be a great one for them because their ratios of classroom support are high, and that means that they can share this. I can send it, share it with them. They can import it. So you can put it, once you've created it, into 5 schools. They can all edit it as well once they've got it. So if they want to, adjust it slightly, that's no problem. As we come back towards the end, we can see here that we can edit those terms and that rubric if we want to change those, edit the curriculum. We've got tech support and advice. There's a user guide in there so all staff can pick it up because, again, this system is for all staff. So it's important that they can access so you don't have to cascade, so they can pick that up and go. FAQ tutorials for the same reasons, so that they've got lots of support to be able to get the most out of that subscription. And we've also got a 360, which is a little upgrade, which enables them to use all the insights for their appraisal as they move through the year. And that's an interesting tool because it hosts a little online folder. You can access it from the website, but it means that we don't bookend appraisals and end up with those pressure points where we're reviewing and reporting. What we can do is build up the portfolio of evidence over the year, and then click AI to generate a report. So I won't go into that one and deviate just now. If you want to kind of learn more about us, I'm going to come back to the final slide in a moment just to conclude things. But we are Nautilus Education, and you can find us at nautilus.education. If we click down onto the community, this is an interesting place to take a look because we've got our Facebook group where you can download free content, and you can also connect with other leaders. We've got Pi Corbett, Craig Randall on there. I think it's about 1,200 people currently, all different types of leaders. And again, we want to encourage people to be able to access things, whether or not it's the new framework, whether or not it's a white paper, or whether or not it's just a quote, those kind of things. But more importantly, we'll also put things on there for Nautilus to help. Newsletter. There's a lot of content in the newsletter. Take a look, download it. It hints, tips, developments, things we've added over the summer. Free content, as well as kind of theory ideas, featured articles about schools that use the system, wherever they may be. And we try and work with, we'll work with lots of schools and get a little angle on that. And the webinars, we do these each week. So we'll do a webinar next week or whatever for SENDcos or subject leaders, or even just, we have one called a 10-minute learning snapshot, just looking at how to kind of perfect that kind of process. And those are designed for your leaders so they can register like this one, pick up a video, and then you've got that capacity across the school, and you don't have to cascade. Because that's the other thing, whilst we're talking about those systems, does it always have to be the head that is there to be able to kind of influence and kind of cascade that insight? Well, it doesn't really. So we will just show them how to use the system. We don't tell anyone how to run a school, but we just give them ideas and solutions like we have done today. Really, it's over to you really from there. Cost, I'll just cover this really quickly. I'll mention really once again about the cost of time and the cost of leadership management time and what we get from that. How does it impact? I feel perfectly comfortable sharing this as a head teacher, conscious of budgets, but what you will get from that. And it's scaled. We set up accounts the same day. You can click, check a few boxes, submit it. We'll set you up. We'll get in touch. We'll provide support. Make sure you're up and running. If you want a training session, we can do a bespoke one to focus on your school improvement priorities. And if you want to add the 360 here as well, you can do. Also, just very quickly, just to mention, if you want to book a demo, that's a great way to learn more and to share the platform with your team. We can take a little look and I'll show you how the process works. And what we'll do as well is have a little look at your website so we can make sure that it's a good fit. So what if you one form entry, two form entry, or your priorities, anything like that, we can align that and make suggestions that fit and ideas that are relevant. 30-day trial there as well. So risk-free, if you want to have a go. It's good to do both, I think. Set up the trial and then check in for a demo so you can get moving and have a go and save a lot of time that way. Okay, so let's stop sharing there and let's just pop back to that slide that we began with really at the start and just sort of review where we've come to before we finish things off today. So this idea really that we are creating and giving systems to our staff to enable them to efficiently discharge their responsibilities. That is a really key critical thing to do. But to do it in a way where they've not only got the processes, so what we look at and how we guide them in the classrooms and what works and fits, not only that toolkit, but also how each leader then contributes to that bigger picture. And that's what we're looking at here. So I'm able to then use that insight to be able to know the school as well as possible based on everybody's intel and those contributions made. That's really powerful. We can influence and improve and develop staff's skill sets. We can use data to plan strategically, and we can create school improvement plans. If we're going to look at the data of the test scores and say that writing is our priority for next year, let's then look and see how does that look across the school. Let's use and focus this energy and these activities into those places so that then we can see who needs support. Where is it strong? Where is, where are the skill sets requiring that further development? So I think there's some really key things there, but ultimately having everything in one place is a pretty good feeling, and being able to click in, see those and use that on a daily basis is good. And it always evolves. Let's not forget this is a process, not an event. So we're not standalone. We're always building, and it becomes more credible as we do that over time. We can delete and filter and manage things from there, but we're always building that picture so we can leave the building feeling assured and feeling confident. And so much of being a head teacher or a senior leader is about having that confidence, and your confidence is based on what you know. I'll leave you with a very brief anecdote, but I always remember walking into a room at a big meeting, 100 heads, and the guy next to me printed out and put on the table his raison line report. It was about this thick, and all of a sudden heart sank because I felt like he knows what his school's doing, this guy, And I know, and I felt a little bit insecure. I felt like this, but as we know that the data is going to expire. We know that if we sit down and learn the data, that in a week's time, it's going to be different. I also know that raise online, it wasn't great. So I had to use the insights, really, and the work that we did in the classrooms to justify and talk about how good the teaching was, which it was, because it was a complex school, challenging area, high deprivation, it was big, and it was a new school, and we'd also come from special measures. So you can see really kind of how we need to do this, and that idea of having everything at your fingertips for you as a head, can we systematically create those, and can we be in receipt of all those insights as well, and at the same time empower those leaders.
As a busy school leader, I rely on my iPad to capture all of the teaching and learning at our school. I move around classrooms, capturing snapshots of great work, inputting ideas and commendations for each teacher. Sharing same-day supportive feedback without having to write reports. I spotlight the best learning, using tagged photos to promote great teaching, to celebrate success, and to demonstrate impact. With my leadership dashboard, all of my work is in one place. I can view all of my teaching and learning with analysis, curriculum gallery, and reports, with AI summaries to save time. And at the end of another busy day, I can leave the school feeling secure about standards in the classroom without relying on test scores or standalone monitoring. In our school, we've redefined the humble lesson observation. In our school, we say, don't observe, capture.